There is a paradox that is at once striking and captivating in today's intellectual world. The deeper we go into the most advanced discoveries of modern science, especially quantum mechanics, the more we are astonished to find that key principles scientists are uncovering were taught by the Buddha over 2500 years ago. And more important than mere overlap or coincidence, is this what quantum mechanics is touching, is only the tip of the iceberg, whereas the Buddha's awakened wisdom saw the entire mass, saw the river carrying it its source and its end, a vision far beyond the reach of any instrument, equation or theory humans have devised. Consider this quantum mechanics. The achievement of more than a century of research has shaken to the core our view of a solid, stable world. The double-slit experiment shows that an electron can exist in multiple states at once, and only when we observe it does it take on a specific position. Heisenberg's uncertainty principle affirms that we cannot know both a particle's position and velocity with precision at the same time. The more we fix one, the more the other blurs. Quantum entanglement shatters. Our notions of distance, two particles, can influence one another instantly, even if separated by light years. And the quantum vacuum startles us, what we call empty space, teems with energy and fluctuation. These findings unsettle not only science but philosophy as well, forcing us to reopen questions once thought settled. What is reality? Is matter truly real? Are time and space absolute? Is there an objective reality apart from the observer? It is here that many scientists and philosophers have turned their gaze eastward and found in Buddhist scriptures answers they never expected. Throughout the process of awakening, the Buddha saw clearly that all phenomena, both mind and matter, are impermanent, not self and dependently arisen. He saw that all things exist only in networks of conditions, without self-nature, never static, never separate. He saw plainly that the observer and the observed cannot exist independently. They are two facets of a single process. Remarkably, this seeing did not arise from sophisticated instruments or modern laboratories, but from profound inner cultivation, through virtue, concentration, and wisdom, culminating in a direct realization of reality, unmediated by concept or by end hypothesis. If quantum mechanics requires giant particle accelerators, intricate measurements, and abstract mathematical models to inch toward these principles, the Buddha needed only one laboratory, his own body and mind. In deep concentration, he saw mind moments arising and passing with a rapidity no device can register. He saw the interplay among mind-mental factors and material phenomena at the subtlest level, recognizing that there is no permanent I standing behind and directing this process. He not only described phenomena, he discerned the origin of all suffering and ignorance and the path to end them. This reveals a fundamental difference between quantum mechanics and the Buddha's wisdom. Quantum theory describes and predicts physical phenomena. The Buddha's wisdom both sees the essence and provides a way to be freed from all the constraints of that very essence. One helps us understand the world, the other helps us be free within it and even go beyond it. Remember, quantum mechanics, wondrous as it is, remains within the domain of matter and energy. It cannot measure a newly arisen impulse of greed, a flare of anger, or the birth of a moment of loving kindness. It cannot compute karma, the causal relationship among intention, action, and the results we experience. By contrast, the Buddha's wisdom sees each moment of mind and its concomitants, clearly discerns whether they are wholesome or unwholesome, tainted or untainted, and sees the connection between one mind moment and the entire stream of birth and death. Therefore, when we place quantum mechanics beside the Buddha's wisdom, the point is not merely that Buddhism resembles quantum theory here and there. Rather, quantum theory has thus far confirmed only a very small fraction of what the Buddha saw. The remainder, the deepest and most liberating part, has not yet been touched by modern science and may never be if it relies solely on physical measurement. This transcendence lies in the fact that the Buddha did not only see indeterminacy, superposition, and interdependence at the level of matter, he saw them operating within consciousness itself. He saw that the root of suffering is not in phenomena themselves, but in the mind's clinging and identification with them. He did not merely note that reality changes when we observe, as quantum theory suggests. He showed how to observe without attachment, to go beyond all such change. And crucially, this wisdom is not reserved for a singular genius like the Buddha. Anyone can personally verify it by following the path. This is what makes the Buddha's wisdom not just a theory, a philosophy, or a descriptive system, but an experimental method, an inner experiment in which the observer and the observed are one. On this journey, we will not stop at tallying parallels between quantum mechanics and Buddhist teaching. We will probe why the Buddha's vision surpasses quantum theory, why principles quantum physics has only recently discovered were taught 25 centuries ago, and why only through realization, not mere conceptual understanding, can we reach the depths that present-day science has yet to approach. For if quantum mechanics is a doorway prompting humanity to doubt its old picture of the world, then the Buddha's wisdom is the path that carries us through that door into a wholly new domain, beyond the limits of time and space, beyond I and mine where suffering ceases. And the most wondrous thing is this, that domain is not far away. It is precisely where we stand, in each present moment, simply awaiting clear seeing. In the classic experiments of quantum mechanics, the observer appears as a mysterious yet decisive factor. Before observation, a particle can exist in multiple states at once. A wave of possibilities spreads throughout space. When measurement is applied, that state collapses to a definite outcome. This phenomenon defies ordinary explanation. Does our looking or measuring really have the power to shape reality? This question has led many scientists and philosophers to puzzle over the role of consciousness in the cosmic picture. At the scientific level, it is a paradox. Seen through the lens of Buddhist teaching, particularly the Abhidharma, that paradox becomes surprisingly familiar. The Buddha taught that mind precedes all things, mind is chief, mind creates. This saying does not only speak to the mind's influence on moral behavior, it articulates a foundational principle. Every experience we have of the world arises with mind as the subject that receives, classifies, and interprets. The observer in the language of quantum theory and the mind in Buddhist teaching are named differently, but refer to the same central factor. Without cognition, there is no world. As we know in the Abhidharma, reality is analyzed into three pillars: mind, citta, mental factors, and material phenomena, rupa. Material phenomena include all physical events from the body sounds and light to the tiniest specks of dust. But material phenomena become experience only when they are received by the mind. The mind is a stream of cognition that arises and ceases continuously, and each moment of mind is accompanied by mental factors, auxiliary mental elements, such as feeling, perception, attention, anger, and faith. It is precisely this combination of mind plus mental factors that labels material phenomena and turns them into this thing, that person, a compliment or an insult within our experience. This means that the world we live in is not an objective entity lying outside us. It is the result of the interaction between material phenomena and mind. When we say I see a tree, in fact there are only material phenomena, light shapes and colors impinging on the eye, signals transmitted to the brain. Then the mind arises, recognizes, and assigns the name tree. Without this process, the tree does not exist as an independent object in our experience. If you compare this with the double-slit experiment, you will find an intriguing convergence. In quantum theory, an electron has not decided whether it is a wave or a particle until it is observed. In Buddhist teaching, material phenomena are not any fixed object until the mind knows them and the mental factors ascribe meaning. The collapse of the wave state in quantum mechanics can be seen as akin to the mind's act of designation and fixation. Out of countless latent possibilities, a phenomenon becomes this or that when it is cognized. But the Buddha's wisdom goes further by showing that the I doing the observing is also not an independent fixed entity. The so-called observer is in fact a series of mind moments arising and ceasing continuously, with no soul or immutable self standing behind to control them. That is while quantum theory still tacitly assumes an observer who exists to perform measurement. Buddhism dispenses with that very assumption. Not only the observed is dependently arisen, the observer is dependently arisen as well. This is a leap of insight that modern science has not yet made, because science still rests on the assumption of a subject who observes and measures. Buddhism, by contrast, allows no assumption to stand outside observation. Both subject and object are seen as processes, without a foundational essence, only phenomena, events in operation. Consider an everyday example. You hear someone say something that makes you angry. From the ordinary perspective, you think, I am angry because that person insulted me. But in the Abhidhamma, there is no I being insulted, and the other person does not truly exist as an independently real entity. There are only material phenomena, sound impinging on the ear, the mind giving rise to painful feeling, perception identifying it as an insult, attention directing the mind toward a reaction, the mental factor of anger arising. The entire process unfolds in successive instants. The observer, the I, is merely a conventional label for that flowing process. The meeting point here is that both quantum theory and Buddhism affirm that reality cannot be separated from the observer. But Buddhism goes farther by saying that the observer is also just part of a dependently arisen process, and therefore there is nothing to cling to, no fixed I to defend or assert. This opens a profoundly practical implication. If the world exists only in interaction with mind, and mind itself is non-self, then suffering, which arises from clinging to I and mine, loses its footing. This is where the Buddha's wisdom goes beyond all scientific models. It not only describes phenomena, but also points to the path that ends the suffering bound up with those phenomena. When a practitioner cultivates mindfulness, they resemble an observer in a quantum experiment, but an observer of their own mind. The difference is that they do not try to collapse states in order to measure. They simply see arising and ceasing without interference and without imputing meaning. Observing in this way, they see clearly that all mental states, joy, sorrow, anger, love, arise and pass, and that there is no real I in the midst of that stream of change. And here is a subtle difference from the quantum experiment in physics. The observer cannot be separated from their impact on the physical system. In Buddhism, the practitioner is trained to observe without identification, without producing new karma, without distorting psychological reality. This requires a degree of wakefulness that science cannot measure, but anyone can personally realize if they follow the right path. In short, if quantum theory compels humanity to re-examine its belief in an objective reality, Buddhism compels us to re-examine our belief in the subjective I. These two perspectives converge in dissolving the illusion of an absolute separation between observer and observed. But Buddhism takes one decisive step further. It dissolves the illusion of the observer itself, opening the door for the mind to no longer be bound to any reality, whether objective or subjective. When this is understood, we see that the phrase, "mind precedes all things," is not merely a moral teaching, but an accurate description of how reality operates. At the same time, it is a reminder that if we wish to change the world we experience, we must first change the mind not by force, but by seeing it clearly as its island. Among all the foundational principles of quantum mechanics, Heisenberg's uncertainty principle is one of the most shocking discoveries, profoundly shaking humanity's view of the nature of the material world. In 1927, the German physicist Werner Heisenberg demonstrated an inviolable limit: we cannot simultaneously measure with precision both the position and the velocity of a particle. The more precisely we measure position, the more uncertain the information about velocity becomes. Conversely, the more precisely we measure velocity, the more indeterminate the position becomes. This is not a limitation of our instruments or a flaw in experimental method. Heisenberg affirmed that it is a fundamental feature of nature, at the quantum level, an objective invariant limit. Microscopic reality, by its very nature, does not allow a single snapshot to capture both quantities with perfect clarity at once. In other words, woven into the fabric of the particle world is an inherent ambiguity. For many people, this principle is merely a physical law describing the limits of measurement. But seen more deeply, the uncertainty principle poses a profound philosophical question. Perhaps what we call reality does not possess fixed properties that exist independently, but only exists in dependence on how we approach and observe it. If even a basic material particle cannot be fixed with both position and momentum at once, then the belief in a solid, stable, absolutely determinate world is an illusion. And precisely at this point, Buddhist wisdom, especially the principle of non-self, appears as a deeper and more comprehensive explanation. Non-self, in Buddhist teaching, is the truth that there is no I or fixed, unchanging essence standing behind and controlling this body-mind or this world. All phenomena, whether material or mental, arise from many conditions coming together, and thus they have no independent self-nature. They arise when conditions are sufficient and cease when conditions dissolve. Therefore, no independently existing entity can be found, just as the uncertainty principle shows that a particle cannot be held in both fixed properties of position and velocity at once. If the uncertainty principle describes the inherent indeterminacy of physical properties, then non-self points to the ungraspability of all phenomena, including what we call I and mine. The Buddha did not merely say that all things are impermanent. He went further. Nothing exists as a truly existent essence, non-self. What we take to be a continuous self is in fact only a succession of arising and ceasing processes. To see this parallel more clearly, take an example. Suppose you want to freeze a happy mental state and keep it forever. You will discover that this is impossible. The more you try to hold it, the faster it slips away. This is like trying to measure a particle's position and velocity at the same time. The nature of the phenomenon does not allow it. That happy mind arises only when conditions are sufficient: positive emotions, favorable circumstances, and a mind not obscured. When any one of those conditions falls away, the state also disappears. In the Abhidhamma, this operation is described with micro-level detail, even more finely than quantum theory describes particles. A single mind exists for only 1/17th of a blink of an eye. A unit called a mind moment then ceases to make way for the next mind. Each mind carries different mental factors, generating feeling, perception, and intention. This arising and ceasing happens so rapidly that without meditative insight, we mistake it for a continuous stream, just as we mistake a film for a seamless image when it is only thousands of discrete frames. Here is precisely where the uncertainty, principle, and non-self meet at a very deep level. Quantum theory discovers that at the most basic level, reality cannot be boxed into fixed attributes. The Dharma sees that the whole field of phenomena, both physical and mental, is not only indeterminate, but also without anyone who owns or controls it. The Buddha's vision goes further in that he not only discerned indeterminacy, but also pointed out its causes and its consequences for suffering. When we cling to a self or to a world with unchanging properties, we fall into delusion. And when reality changes, as its nature is, this delusion shatters and suffering arises. To understand non-self is to understand that there is nothing to hold, and from that understanding suffering loses its ground. A physicist might say, we cannot know both position and velocity at once. An awakened practitioner might say, we cannot hold on to any state or phenomenon. Both statements speak to a fundamental limit, but the Dharma turns that limit into a key to liberation. Do not grasp, let go. This becomes vivid in meditation. When sitting and watching the breath, we do not try to keep the breath in some fixed state. Whether the inhalation is deep or shallow, long or short, it is simply seen and released. Thoughts that arise are seen and released. This non-clinging attitude is the practice of non-self, and it runs parallel to the uncertainty principle. We do not demand that reality stand still so we can seize it. We accept and clearly see it as it is operating. Interestingly, some quantum scientists have described the micro-realm in terms strikingly close to the language of insight meditation. They speak of a field of possibilities, continuous fluctuations, and the relationship between observer and system. All of this echoes how the Dharma speaks of mind and phenomena, but they still remain at the level of outward description. The Buddha went inward into lived experience, directly realizing non-self, not through theory, but by seeing the arising and passing of each mind moment. Therefore, when we set the uncertainty principle alongside non-self, we can see that quantum theory confirms on the material plane what the Dharma has seen across both the material and mental planes. More importantly, the Dharma turns that insight into a way of life. If the world is indeterminate and non-self, then the path to peace is not control, but letting go and living mindfully in each moment. There is a lovely metaphor to close this part. Imagine you are standing by a river and want to fill a ladle with water from the current. The instant you scoop the water in your ladle is already different from what you saw a second earlier. You cannot keep that flow because its nature is to move. The uncertainty principle tells you that you cannot hold both the position and velocity of a particle. Non-self tells you that there is no I to hold and nothing truly to hold. When you understand this, you no longer struggle against the current. You learn to stand still, to observe, and to smile as everything passes. If the uncertainty principle has led humanity to reconsider the idea of a fixed reality, then quantum entanglement has shaken one of classical physics' deepest convictions, the belief that information and influence can travel only within the pranava, limit of the speed of light. Albert Einstein once called entanglement spooky action, at a distance, because it seems to run counter to every physical intuition. This phenomenon occurs when two microscopic particles, such as two photons, are created in the same interaction. From that moment, they become entangled, meaning the state of one is tightly correlated with the state of the other. The marvel is that even when they are separated by a vast distance, millions or billions of kilometers, measuring the state of one instantly determines the state of the other, as if an invisible thread were linking them outside the limits of time and space. Within the framework of classical physics, this is nearly impossible to accept. If information had to be transmitted between the two particles, the maximum speed would be the speed of light, and there would necessarily be a delay. But experiments show no delay. The effect is instantaneous. This forces physicists to acknowledge that at the quantum level, two entangled particles are not truly two separate entities. They are a single system, no matter how great the physical distance between them. And here is a profound meeting point with the principle of dependent origination in the Dharma. Dependent origination is one of the pillars of Buddhist wisdom. The Buddha affirmed this being that becomes, with the arising of this that arises, this not being that does not become, with the ceasing of this that ceases. This is not merely a one-line causal rule, but a mesh of conditions in which all phenomena exist by relying on one another. Nothing stands alone. In the Abhidhamma, dependent origination applies not only to physical phenomena, but also to psychology and karma. A mental event never arises by itself. It is always nourished by conditions, contact, feeling, perception, attention, habits, memory, environment. And once it has arisen, that very event becomes a condition for subsequent events. Like two entangled particles, mental and material phenomena are linked so deeply that they cannot be separated. Imagine hearing a familiar piece of music. Emotions surge. Sound material phenomena strikes the ear, generating neural signals. Material phenomena activating memory. The mental factor of perception leading to feeling. The mental factor of feeling and a cascade of physiological responses such as a sprawl, quickened heartbeat, and goosebumps. Material phenomena. All of this unfolds almost instantaneously, like entangled particles, affecting each other despite their separation. In quantum theory, entanglement shows that distance is no barrier to relatedness. In the Dharma, dependent origination shows that time is no barrier either. A seed planted in the distant past can bear fruit today if conditions are sufficient. And it is not merely two isolated events that are related. The entire universe is a net of dependent origination, in which all phenomena influence one another. The fundamental difference is that quantum physics has only demonstrated instantaneous correlation at the particle level under special experimental conditions. The Dharma sees such relatedness at every level and in every phenomenon from the tiniest thought to the grandest shifts of the cosmos. The Buddha needed no measuring instruments. Through awakening, he saw this operation across the three times, past, present, and future. Going deeper, quantum entanglement still assumes that before separation, two particles were part of the same system. The Dharma teaches that not only before separation, but from beginningless time, all phenomena have never truly been separate. This vision is vividly expressed in the image of Indra's net, the universe conceived as an infinite net, with a clear jewel at each node, reflecting all the other jewels. Each jewel contains the image of every other jewel, and any change in one is instantly reflected in all. This is a beautiful metaphor for dependent origination, and an intuitive image for quantum entanglement. The profundity of dependent origination is that it speaks not only of connection, but also of the non-self nature of phenomena. In quantum entanglement, two particles cannot be described independently. The nature of one or the other has meaning only in relation. In dependent origination, all phenomena lack inherent nature and exist only thanks to other phenomena. This shatters the illusion of a separate, independently existing self. In practice, understanding dependent origination helps a practitioner see clearly that every thought, emotion, and action is related to countless other conditions. A wholesome word does not stop with the listener. Its influence spreads to those they meet, and so on. Conversely, an unwholesome thought can trigger a chain reaction. This is akin to entangled particles, exchanging state instantaneously. A small change in one place can affect the entire system. Seeing this network of dependent conditions, the practitioner begins to let go of the dividing mind of me and others. Just as in entanglement, it becomes meaningless to speak of one particle as wholly separate from the other. In dependent origination, it becomes meaningless to speak of me as existing completely apart from the myriad dharmas. Peace arises when we stop fighting to defend a separate self and instead live in harmony with our interrelatedness to all. There is another point. Quantum science has not reached. Dependent origination is not merely instantaneous linkage, but also conditional relatedness and multi-layered interaction. One phenomenon may be a direct condition for another, or an indirect one through many intermediaries. In the Abhidharma, dependent origination is analyzed into 24 types of conditions, such as predominant condition, object condition, co-arising condition, and immediacy condition. Each type describes a distinct mode of interaction among phenomena. This goes far beyond the description of entanglement, which considers only a particular kind of correlation in experiments. The Buddha also pointed out that precisely because all phenomena are dependently arisen, they are impermanent and non-self. Quantum entanglement shows that two particles cannot be truly separated. Dependent origination shows that the entire universe cannot be separated, and therefore no entity truly self-exists. This is the basis for uprooting the root of suffering attachment to an independent self. If quantum physics leaves us astonished at the wondrous linkage of two microscopic particles, dependent origination amazes us with the limitless interconnection of all phenomena. More importantly, the Dharma turns that understanding into a living wisdom. Seeing clearly this web of relations makes us more careful with every thought, word, and deed, knowing they never affect only ourselves. In summary, quantum entanglement and dependent origination converge in dissolving the illusion of absolute separateness. But dependent origination goes much further. It encompasses every phenomenon, all time, and all space. It explains why suffering arises and ceases, and it points to the way to live harmoniously within that endless web. If entanglement is a physical demonstration of connection dependent, origination is the comprehensive map of connection and the key to liberation from the cycle of rebirth that such connection sustains. In classical physics, the vacuum is often understood as absolute emptiness, a space with no matter, no air, nothing at all. This seems intuitive. If you pump all the air out of a sealed container, what remains inside is simply void. But in the realm of quantum mechanics, the concept of vacuum is completely different. It is anything but empty, teeming with energy and ceaseless activity. Scientists call this the quantum vacuum, the lowest energy state of a quantum field, yet not nothing. Even when all material particles are removed, quantum fields still fluctuate. Virtual particles continually arise and vanish over extremely short timescales in accordance with the uncertainty principle. Energy can be borrowed from the void briefly and then repaid. This arising and ceasing flows everywhere, even in the gaps between stars or between atomic particles. This leads physicists to realize that what we took as empty space is actually a seething ocean of energy, the substrate of all physical phenomena. At the deepest level, the universe is not built of separate material bricks, but upon continuously fluctuating energy fields from which particles and matter are merely temporary emergent states. Hearing this, a student of the Dharma will immediately think of a core Mahayana concept, emptiness, sunyata. But we must distinguish clearly: emptiness is not nothingness, nor is it merely an ocean of energy, as in physics. Emptiness, as taught by the Buddha and the great commentators, means the absence of inherent nature. All dharmas, whether material or mental, lack any independent, unchanging essence. They exist only by dependent origination, relying on other dharmas to appear. In the Heart Sutra, the line form is not different from emptiness. Emptiness is not different from form states plainly. That form, materiality, and emptiness are not two separate realities. Form is precisely emptiness. Its nature is non-inherent. Emptiness is precisely form from emptiness, dependently arisen, phenomena manifest. This is close to the image in quantum physics from the quantum vacuum particles, and physical events continually appear and dissolve. However, a crucial difference remains. The quantum vacuum is still a concept within the phenomenal world. It lies within time, space, and energy, and remains governed by arising and ceasing. The emptiness the Dharma points to is the nature of all phenomena beyond any concepts of existence or non-existence, arising or ceasing. It is not a physical state, but ultimate reality. Paramasati, the foundation upon which all dependently arisen dharmas rely. Mans, yet it itself is not limited by conditions. To picture this difference, imagine you are looking at an ocean. The quantum vacuum is like the sea's surface that is always rippling, even when there is no wind. Subtle oscillations are ever present. Emptiness is the water nature of that ocean. Whether there are waves or not, that nature is still water, and the waves are only temporary forms of water. Waves can arise, cease, and change, but water does not lose its nature as water. When physicists say the vacuum is not empty, they are only breaking the physical illusion of an absolutely motionless void. When the Buddha says that all phenomena are without inherent nature, he breaks a far deeper illusion. Nothing whatsoever, mind, matter, time, or space, exists independently. Everything is merely the operation of dependent origination, with no absolute foothold to grasp. This has great practical significance. If we stop at a quantum vacuum kind of understanding, we may still cling to the idea that the universe's foundation is energy and treat it as an absolute entity. In the Dharma, clinging to any notion such as this is the ultimate reality, is a form of attachment, and attachment is the cause of suffering. Emptiness does not let us stop at any description or concept. It leads us to release all concepts and directly realize reality as it island. Seeing emptiness, a practitioner no longer seeks an unchanging ground, to rely on understanding that every such search is grasping at conditioned phenomena. Instead, they live freely in each dependently arisen moment, unbound by the ideas it must be like this, or it has always been like that. This is where emptiness becomes liberating wisdom, not merely a philosophical concept. In meditation, contemplating emptiness helps us see that all phenomena, sensations in the body, thoughts in the mind, and the sounds and images around us are empty in nature. They may appear, exist for a while and vanish, yet nothing fixed stands behind them. Likewise, in the quantum vacuum, virtual particles appear and disappear incessantly, and there is no permanent original particle that never changes. Another profound point: emptiness is not nihilism or meaningless void. It is precisely the ground of all possibilities. Just as all particles and physical phenomena can arise from the quantum vacuum, so because phenomena lack fixed self-nature, they can change, interact, and condition one another. If things had immutable essences, everything would be frozen, unable to function. Therefore, when scientists marvel at the richness of the quantum vacuum, a Buddhist practitioner smiles. That is part of the insight into emptiness, but it still lies within the phenomenal realm. To see fully, one must release even the concepts of energy and fluctuation, directly realizing the non-inherent nature of all dharmas. In short, the quantum vacuum and emptiness meet in dispelling the illusion of a static void, and both point out that the ground is not inert but full of generative potential. Yet emptiness goes further. It does not stop at a physical description, but reveals the lack of inherent nature in all phenomena, and opens a path of realization that frees us from every attachment. Like waves and water, particles and vacuum are merely different expressions within a dependently arisen nature. Seeing this, the mind naturally becomes open, light, and free. One of the most unexpected conclusions quantum mechanics has offered humanity is this: what we call matter, seemingly certain, stable, and solid, is not as real as we once thought. At the macroscopic level, you see a table, feel its hardness, and see it occupying a fixed position in space. But if you shrink your view down to the atomic scale, the picture changes completely. The table is almost entirely empty space. Its atoms consist of a tiny nucleus in the middle, with electrons moving in a probability cloud around it. The ratio of empty space to solid stuff is overwhelmingly lopsided. If the nucleus were the size of a pea, an electron would be hundreds of meters away. Going deeper still, electrons and protons, what we think of as particles, appear as oscillations of quantum fields. They are both particle-like and wave-like, and exist as probabilities until interaction or observation occurs. In other words, matter at the most basic level is not a set of hard bricks that build the universe, but states of energy potentials for existence. Only when measured or cognized do they appear in a definite form. This strikingly coincides with the Buddha's teaching in the Abhidhamma. The world is not as we imagine. Yet the Buddha goes further than saying matter is structurally empty, as quantum physics suggests. The illusion does not reside in matter itself, but in how our mind labels, classifies, and clings to it. Matter, sounds, images, and emotions are all phenomena that arise dependently. They exist in our experience only when the mind receives them, along with associated mental factors. For example, you look at a flower. In physics, light reflected from the petals enters your eye, stimulates the retina, and generates electrical signals that travel to the brain. In the Dharma, that sequence is not yet seeing a flower. Only when cognition arises and applies the label flower, drawing on memory concepts and feeling, does a flower appear in your experience. This means the flower does not exist as an objective, separate entity. It is the result of the interaction between external material phenomena and the internal mind. Without an observing mind, the flower is merely a collection of material qualities, colors, shapes, scents not yet defined. This closely resembles a principle of quantum theory. Before measurement, a particle exists only as a set of possibilities. Upon measurement, it selects a definite state. In Buddhist teaching, the mind is precisely that measuring act. It turns a bundle of sensory data into a named thing, endowed with meaning and emotional value. And this is what the Buddha wants us to see. The world we live in is in essence a picture painted by the mind. It is not an objective snapshot of reality, but a subjective model built from sensation, perception, and memory. When we believe this model is reality itself, we fall into delusion, and from that delusion, all clinging, craving, and suffering begin. Consider a simple example. Two people watch the same sunset. One finds it beautiful, heart-stirring, and feels relaxed and grateful. The other has just lost a job, is full of anxiety, and finds the sunset cold and sad. It is the same physical event. The sun's red-orange light as it drops low, but two different worlds are created because each mind measures it differently. Quantum physics says, the outcome depends on how you observe. The Dharma says, the outcome depends on mind and karma. The superiority of the Buddha's wisdom over quantum theory is that he shows a way out of this illusion. Science describes how matter is not solid and how reality depends on the observer, but it does not give us a method to transcend the bondage of subjective cognition. The Dharma does not merely say see differently. It teaches us to look directly into the arising of experience. When the eye sees form, the ear hears sound, and the nose smells fragrance. One simply notes, seeing, hearing, smelling, without letting the mental factor of perception or the mental factor of craving intrude to label, compare, love or hate. Observed in this way, the illusory wall of the material world gradually becomes thin. A practitioner of Vipassana insight meditation will see this very clearly. Looking deeply at an object, it ceases to be a monolithic thing and becomes a succession of sensations, colors, and shapes that change continuously. Even one's own body, when closely observed, is only a collection of sensations, notions, and reactions. There is nothing that is mine. In that way of seeing, matter is no more real than a dream, for both are woven by the mind from sensory data and memory. Quantum theory may bewilder us by saying that matter is only field oscillations or probabilities of existence. The Dharma helps us experience directly that in our own experience, matter is only one part of the process of dependent origination. It does not exist by itself, and its value or meaning is entirely assigned by the mind. When this is seen clearly, a great freedom opens. We are no longer haunted by the urge to control the material world to our liking because we understand that such control is only control over an illusion. Instead, we shift our focus to seeing and releasing that illusion. It is like watching a movie. If we forget we are watching, we are swept away by the story's emotions. If we remember we are sitting in a theater, we can enjoy it without being deceived by the illusion. In the Diamond Sutra, the Buddha says all phenomena that have appearance are illusory. If one sees that all appearances are not appearances, one sees the Tathagata. This is not merely moral teaching. It points directly to the nature of all matter. It is only appearance, the phenomenal form, not ultimate reality. Quantum mechanics, in a certain sense, is retracing that path by dismantling the belief in a solid objective material world. But to reach liberating insight, we must take the next step. We must not only abandon belief in matter, but also abandon belief in the observing mind as a fixed entity. When both matter and mind are seen as dependently arisen, impermanent, and without self, the illusion truly dissolves. In short, matter seen either through quantum science or through the Buddha's wisdom is not as real as we thought. Science shows us that its microstructure is empty and indeterminate. The Dharma shows us that the world we cling to is a product of mind, and that this very mind is also not fixed. Seeing this is the key to letting go of the craving, fear, and suffering bound to the material world we once believed unchanging. In school physics, we were taught that time is a steady, linear flow, past, present, and future, lining up like numbers on an endless ruler. When science entered the realms of quantum mechanics and certain conceptual theories, absolute time began to wobble. Especially at the quantum level, time ceases to be a smooth flow and becomes discontinuous and flexible, even reversible, depending on conditions of observation and interaction. Some quantum experiments have shown effects that make the very concept of time hard to grasp. For example, in quantum retrocausal correlations, a measurement outcome in the present can influence the state before the measurement. In other words, the future can affect the past at the microscopic level. Although this remains controversial, it suggests that the temporal order we feel is not a rigid law of nature. Moreover, time in quantum mechanics bears indeterminacy, similar to that of position or momentum. In certain quantum models, a system can exist in multiple superposed temporal states, and only upon measurement does it choose a definite one. This has led many scientists to ask whether time truly exists as an independent entity, or whether it is only a way we measure change. Placed alongside the Buddha's wisdom, especially the Abhidharma, we find a surprising convergence, a point the Buddha spoke of more than 25 centuries ago. All phenomena arise and cease in extremely fine units of time called moments. What we take to be the present is not a single extended instant, but a succession of arising and ceasing. In the Abhidhamma, a mind moment is the shortest unit, during which a single mental event persists before ceasing to make way for the next. Commentaries say that a single blink can contain billions of arising and ceasing mind moments. This means that while we think we are feeling one emotion or seeing one image, a multitude of minds have arisen and ceased in that interval. The stream of mind that we sense as continuous is in fact countless discrete units occurring in succession, just as a film is a sequence of separate frames projected in rapid order. Quantum physics, when speaking of time at the Planck scale, begins to touch a similar idea. Time cannot be subdivided without limit in a physical sense. There are extreme minimal units. Within that regime, notions like before and after blur, and the flow of time is only a way of arranging events rather than an absolute essence. The Dharma goes further by showing that not only matter but also consciousness proceeds by rhythms of arising and ceasing. A single mind arises and persists briefly, then ceases. As soon as one mind ceases, the next arises, and the stream continues without pause. The I that feels time is simply the linking of memories of successive mind moments, not a subject that endures through them. Consider a familiar experience when listening to music. You feel you are hearing a continuous melody, but in fact the ear receives discrete vibrations. The mind registers segments, then perception connects them into a musical line. As in cinema, the eye receives individual frames, and the brain stitches them into smooth motion. This is the mind's illusion of a flowing time. If quantum theory suggests that time at the microscopic level is discontinuous and may be indeterminate, the Dharma makes clear that the time we live by each day is a conventional concept based on the linking of memory and perception. Ultimately, reality is only the arising and ceasing of discrete moments of phenomena. There is no past and no future, only the present moment operating, and even this moment vanishes as soon as it arises. Understanding this has profound practical significance. It breaks the illusion of a timeline in which we exist as a fixed subject, drifting from past to future. When this illusion dissolves, anxiety about the future and regret about the past lose their footing. The practitioner sees that there is no self who lived in the past or will live in the future. There are only phenomena arising and ceasing right now. This also clarifies the difference between the approaches of science and the Dharma. Quantum physics studies the nature of time with instruments and equations and concludes that time may not be absolute or continuous. The Dharma directly investigates mind and phenomena through meditation and concludes that time is only a concept the mind creates to describe change. When that concept is transcended, the practitioner meets the timeless reality of nirvana. A simple metaphor helps. If time is a reel of film, quantum physics shows that the reel is a set of discrete frames that could even be projected in reverse order. The Dharma says, look more closely. Not only are the frames discrete, the viewer is also only part of those very frames. There is no one who truly watches. Seeing this, you are no longer swept into the plot of the movie. Therefore, the concept of the moment in the Dharma is not merely a philosophical description, but a tool for liberation. When a practitioner truly experiences the continual arising and ceasing in each moment of the breath of sensations and of thoughts, the mind naturally releases attachment because it sees there is nothing to keep and no one to do the keeping. This is an experience beyond any scientific description, no matter how close science comes to understanding microscopic time. In sum, quantum theory and the Dharma meet at the point that time is not absolute, not continuous, and only a way to describe change. The Dharma goes further. It gives us a method to verify this truth directly within our own mind, and from that opens the door to freedom from every bondage of time. In quantum mechanics, phenomena do not unfold with the absolute determinism of classical physics. At the microscopic level, particles do not follow a single fixed path. They exist as probabilities. Before observation, an electron is not at any particular position. It has only a probability distribution for being found at different places. When measured, this wave of probability collapses to a definite value. This means that even if you knew all the initial conditions of a quantum system, you still could not predict the exact outcome. You can only compute the probability that the result will fall into one among many possibilities. This indeterminacy forces quantum mechanics to rely on probability to describe reality. Placed alongside the Buddha's teaching, we readily think of karma, the law of cause and effect for mind and action. Karma is not a deterministic script in which everything happens exactly as if preordained. Karma is the result of countless interacting conditions. It is always conditional, and therefore, like quantum probabilities, it is not fixed. A wholesome act today does not guarantee 100% that you will immediately receive a good result, because that result depends on many other factors, including past karma, present conditions, the environment, and the fresh intentions you generate later. Conversely, an unwholesome seed may not bear fruit at once, or may be partly neutralized if it meets wholesome conditions. Imagine planting a mango seed. In principle, the seed has the potential to become a mango tree. For that to happen, it needs soil, water, light, proper temperature, and protection from pests. If any condition is lacking or excessive, the seed may die or change course. So it is with karma. A karmic cause bears fruit only when conditions are sufficient. Those conditions arise not only from the original act but from countless other factors. This resembles quantum mechanics. A particle has many possible states, but the specific state depends on measurement conditions, environment, and interactions. Change the conditions, and the probabilities change, and so does the outcome. Yet the Dharma goes beyond the probabilistic picture of quantum theory. Quantum theory describes the indeterminacy of material particles. The Dharma explains how karma operates across body, speech, and mind, and shows how to transform it. Science says you can only predict probabilities. The Dharma says you can change those probabilities by changing your mind and actions. The Abhidharma classifies karma by many criteria: heavy and light, wholesome and unwholesome. Some karma determines the realm of rebirth. Other karma provides a supporting background that shapes tendencies. Death proximate karma is the final stream of mind before death. Each kind of karma is a set of conditions that influence outcomes, just as each measurement in quantum mechanics is a set of conditions that influence a particle's state. The crucial point is that the Buddha affirmed that karma can be transformed. If an unwholesome cause has been planted but you keep generating wholesome causes, the conditions for the bad seed to ripen will weaken. As in quantum experiments, if you change the environment or the measurement settings, the outcome probabilities change. Conversely, if you keep feeding unwholesome causes, the probability of their results increases. A practical example: a person has a tendency toward anger. Past karma has created a habit of ill will. In a situation of insult, the probability that he will flare up is very high. If he practices mindfulness and learns to recognize anger over time, the probability of an outburst decreases and the probability of a calm response increases. This is the adjustment of probabilities in daily life taught clearly in the training of virtue, concentration, and wisdom. Unlike quantum probabilities, which are intrinsic properties of a physical system, the probabilities in the field of karma can be changed intentionally through practice. Here lies the superiority of the Buddha's wisdom. It does not only describe, it points to a path of practice that brings about the desired results. When practitioners understand karma in this way, they no longer view life with fatalism, thinking this is just my lot. Nor do they indulge the illusion that a single good deed will immediately fix everything. They know that each thought, word, and action is adjusting the probabilities for the future, and this gives powerful motivation to plant wholesome causes continually. One simple image helps. You are playing a classical coin toss. If you knew exactly the force of your hand, the angle, and the coin's mass, you could predict the outcome. In quantum theory, even if you knew everything, the outcome would still be probabilistic. In the Dharma, the coin stands for karma. You cannot control everything, but you can change the way you toss by changing your mind, and your actions increasing the chance of the side you wish to see. In summary, karma and quantum probability meet at a common point. Outcomes are not predetermined, but depend on many interacting conditions. Yet the Dharma goes further by giving us a lever of influence, training in virtue, concentration, and wisdom to shift those probabilities toward the wholesome and ultimately to step free of the causal round of birth and death. Quantum mechanics, despite radically transforming humanity's view of material reality, still operates only within the realm of physical phenomena. It measures a particle's energy, position, momentum, and spin state. It can describe the probability of events at the microscopic scale and compute extremely complex models to forecast the behavior of quantum systems. But there is a domain of reality where quantum science, and every other measuring science, remains entirely powerless. The inner subjective realm, where emotions, intentions, cognitions, lived experience, and awakening unfold. A scientist may measure the oscillation of a photon in the quantum vacuum with exquisite precision, yet cannot measure the degree of compassion in a single mind moment. They can determine the probability of finding an electron in a region of space, but they cannot calculate the probability that a person will forgive rather than take revenge for. That depends not only on physical conditions, but on deep strata of consciousness, karma, and free will. Quantum science measures what the eyes, ears, and instruments can register, but it cannot touch the essence of the observer, the mind, in the language of the Dharma. Instruments can record brain waves, heart rate, and chemical reactions in the body when a person is angry or joyful. But brain waves are not anger, and a heartbeat is not happiness. They are only outward, physical expressions of an inward, psychological event, and that event is known directly only by the one experiencing it. In the Abhidhamma, mind is defined not as matter or energy, but as knowing citta, a continuous flow of knowing moments. This knowing cannot be weighed or measured by any physical unit. It has no mass, occupies no space, and cannot be directly acted upon by physical forces like electromagnetism or gravity. This is why, for all the progress of science, no machine has yet been able to measure or precisely describe an inner experience. For example, if a practitioner enters deep absorption, the mind utterly still, emotions quieted, and a profound bliss is present, instruments may register certain signs, a slower heartbeat, stable alpha or theta rhythms. Yet none of those numbers can convey that felt peace. Only the person in that state knows it directly. This is the fundamental difference between the approaches of science and the Dharma. Quantum physics investigates external reality with objective tools. The Dharma investigates internal reality with a subjective tool, the mind itself trained in meditation and mindfulness. Strikingly, what quantum theory cannot measure is precisely what the Buddha identified as the heart of liberation from suffering, the impermanent and non-self nature of mind and phenomena, the root of ignorance, the mechanisms by which greed, hatred, and delusion arise and cease, and the experience of nirvana. Nirvana is a state beyond all concepts of arising and ceasing existence and non-existence. It is not a physical phenomenon, and so cannot be measured by instruments. You can measure the temperature of a flame, but you cannot measure the absence of flame in empty space. Nirvana is the absence of greed, hatred, and delusion at the deepest level. Another limit of quantum theory is that it still relies on mediated observation. To know a particle's state, we must measure it. The result is always affected by the act of measurement itself. The Dharma encourages direct observation without instruments and without conceptual overlays, the seeing of a quiet, lucid mind, unclouded by discursive thought. If quantum physicists debate the measurement problem, when and how the wave function collapses, then, in the Dharma, measurement is mindfulness. When the mind observes itself with full awareness without judgment or interference, one sees the arising and ceasing of phenomena without forcing them to collapse into some fixed state. This leads to a major difference. Quantum theory says, this phenomenon occurs with probability X under condition Y. The Dharma says, this phenomenon occurs because of conditions A, B, and C. If you do not want it to occur, cut off these causes and nourish those. This is the difference between description and transformation. A homely example, quantum theory, can offer a model predicting the likelihood that a particle passes through the left slit or the right slit. The Dharma gives you a way to change the trajectory of your own mind, so it does not pass through the slits of greed, hatred, and delusion, but through the slits of compassion and wisdom. In other words, what quantum theory cannot measure is exactly the center of the path to liberation, the qualities of mind, intention, motive, wisdom, compassion, relinquishment. These are variables. Physics cannot quantify, yet they determine the quality of our lives and the direction we take in samsara. In short, quantum mechanics is a marvelous tool for understanding the material world, but it cannot and will never replace the direct seeing of an awakened mind. It can draw maps but cannot bring you to the destination. It can measure particles but cannot measure a single moment of release. For this reason, if we wish to reach the end of knowing not only about the outer world but about ourselves, we must enter the Dharma's laboratory, observe the mind, see phenomena, and realize what even the most advanced machines cannot touch. If quantum physics uses giant particle accelerators, sophisticated laser systems, and ultra-sensitive detectors to probe the microworld, the Dharma has its own observing instrument, the meditative mind. This is the inner laboratory the Buddha and the awakened have used to explore the deepest layers of reality, not only the material but also the spiritual. In science, a physical laboratory is designed to isolate noise control conditions and focus all resources on observing the object of study. In the Dharma, samadhi functions. Similarly, it isolates the mind from dispersing influences, keeps it settled, stable, and focused on the object of contemplation. When concentration is established, the mind becomes so clear and keen that it can discern exceedingly subtle phenomena that neither the ordinary eye nor instruments can detect. As described in the Abhidhamma, only when the mind has sufficient concentration does a practitioner see the arising and ceasing moments of mind and phenomena and recognize that the self is merely a sequence of processes with no independent essence. Consider a comparison in quantum physics to observe an electron. You need an electron microscope with extremely high magnification and precision. In meditation, concentrated mind plays a similar role, but instead of magnifying an image, it heightens the clarity and subtlety of knowing. A scattered mind is like a shaky, blurry lens. A quiet, concentrated mind is like a perfect lens that yields a crisp view of every delicate movement. The crucial difference is this: in science, observation typically alters the state of the object, the measurement problem. In meditation, the practitioner is trained to observe without interference, without collapsing the ongoing state into a fixed image or story. This is pure observation, seeing things as they are without embellishment or omission. In the course of meditative practice, meditation not only sharpens the image of phenomena, but also settles unwholesome mental factors, such as aversion and delusion. Just as a physicist must remove background noise to measure accurately, a practitioner must remove mental noise, wandering thoughts, and clinging emotions to see the nature of phenomena clearly. When the mind is no longer driven by emotion or bias, seeing becomes transparent, and this is the condition for prajna, liberative wisdom, to arise. Interestingly, in meditation, a practitioner can recreate conditions analogous to quantum experiments, but on the inner plane. For example, when contemplating the body in the Great Discourse on the Foundations of Mindfulness, Maha Satipatthana Sutta, one observes each subtle movement of the breath, sensations, and posture. In contemplation of feeling, Vedananupasana, one observes feelings arising and ceasing. In contemplation of mind, Cittanupassana, one recognizes a mind with greed, a mind with aversion, a mind in equanimity. Each time, the practitioner is like a scientist recording data, but here the data are living experience, not numbers. This leads to a fundamental difference. In a physics laboratory, you are an outsider, observing an external object. In the laboratory of meditation, you are both the observer and the observed. This is why the Dharma calls it self-realization, direct verification. Only you can measure the state of your own mind. No one else can do it for you. Moreover, meditation does not stop at clear seeing. It is also a vehicle for transformation. In science, observation does not change the laws governing particles. In the Dharma, observation, done rightly with mindfulness and wisdom, changes the very way the mind operates. An anger that is seen clearly at the moment of its first stirrings loses its force and does not get the chance to erupt into harmful speech or action. A seed of craving recognized immediately dissolves before it hardens into deeper attachment. In short, if quantum mechanics helps us understand that the material world is not fixed and depends on the observer, meditation lets us directly experience that our psychological world is the same, and goes further by giving us the capacity to adjust that observer itself, something physical science, for all its sophistication, cannot do. A common meditation metaphor is a glass of cloudy water. When you keep stirring it, the water is murky, and nothing beneath can be seen. When you set it down and leave it, still the sediment settles, the water clears, and even tiny grains of sand become visible. Meditation is precisely setting down the glass of the mind, stopping the agitation of discursive thought, so the sediment can settle and the nature of phenomena can appear. This is why the Buddha is not only an observer but also a liberator. He not only saw that phenomena are impermanent and non-self, he also saw how to cut off the causes of suffering. And it is precisely through the vehicle of meditation that he attained this comprehensive vision. To sum up, meditation in the Dharma is an inner laboratory superior to any physical laboratory in one crucial respect. It can observe and assay phenomena that science cannot touch, the subtlest movements of the mind, and the conditions for the arising and cessation of suffering, and at the same time, it is the tool that can change the system's operation at its root. When the mind becomes a flawless lens, clear and undistorting, we not only understand the universe in a quantum way, we live peacefully and freely within it. In science, every discovery, however, great, must be presented through a model. A model is how humans use concepts, symbols, and equations to describe reality. Quantum mechanics is the same. It does not touch reality itself directly, but represents it with mathematical tools, wave functions, density matrices, or quantum field methods. These models are extraordinarily accurate at predicting experimental results, but they are still representations, not reality itself. Leading quantum physicists, such as Niels Bohr and Richard Feynman, acknowledge that models are not absolute truth. They are tools for thinking and calculating. Even Einstein, dissatisfied with quantum indeterminacy, said that theory is only a bridge between observations, not reality itself. By contrast, the Buddha's awakened wisdom does not rely on models. He needs no system of symbols or formulas to describe impermanence, non-self, and dependent origination. He sees directly without concepts, beyond the limits of language or measurement, a realization of the nature of phenomena as they truly are. This difference is crucial. A model, however complex and accurate, is constrained by its initial assumptions and the theoretical frame it sets. If a phenomenon falls outside that frame, the model fails. Awakened wisdom has no rigid frame. It transcends all concepts. In the Heart Sutra, this is expressed as no wisdom and nothing to attain. Vo tri diok vo dak, no conceptual wisdom left to grasp, and no attainment left to hold. Take an example from quantum mechanics itself. The wave function is central to the theory, but what is its nature? Is it real ontic, or merely a representation of our knowledge, epistemic? This debate has persisted for nearly a century, with no consensus. It shows that a model, however powerful, cannot reach the ultimate essence of reality, because that essence does not fit inside any mathematical expression. By contrast, the Buddha did not leave a single model of reality. He left methods, skillful means for each person to realize directly sometimes the Four Noble Truths, sometimes the 12 links of dependent origination, sometimes the 3 marks of existence: impermanence, suffering, and non-self. These are not competing models, but different doors that open into the same room, the room of direct seeing. It is like the difference between reading a map and standing at the place itself. A map can be exquisitely detailed, but can never replace the feel of the wind, the scents, and the sounds of the place. A quantum model is the map. Awakened wisdom is being at the location, seeing reality from within. Another limitation of models is their indirect mediated nature. Science must gather data through instruments, process it, and infer conclusions. This process is always delayed and depends on the limits of measurement. Enlightenment is different. It is immediate, seeing no intermediary, no inference. When the Buddha declared that all phenomena are non-self, he did not rely on gauges or experiments. He relied on direct experience through meditation. It is also worth noting that every scientific model is provisional. Newtonian theory was once taken as truth until relativity and quantum theory arrived. Even today's pinnacle, quantum mechanics, could be replaced or expanded if humanity discovers a unified theory of everything. By contrast, the Buddha's insight into impermanence, non-self, and dependent origination has never been overturned by any scientific discovery. On the contrary, modern disciplines have confirmed it in many respects. Thus, to say that awakened wisdom surpasses all models is not to deny the value of science, but to point out that models are means, whereas enlightenment is the end. If you cling only to models, you remain outside the door of truth. Only by stepping through, by direct experience, do you truly see. In practice, this means that reading hundreds of books about meditation or listening to hundreds of talks on non-self cannot substitute for a single minute of actually sitting down, following the breath, and witnessing a thought arise and pass without identifying with it. Just as you might memorize every quantum equation, but without ever doing an experiment, still not truly know. In short, awakened wisdom surpasses all models in 3 key ways. 1. It is not constrained by concepts. It is direct experience, not description. 2. It does not depend on measurement conditions. It sees reality as it is without intermediaries. 3. It is not provisional. It cannot be replaced by a new model because it is not a model at all, but ultimate truth. For this reason, even as quantum mechanics continues to grow in scope and sophistication, it will remain within the domain of models. The Buddha's path, when practiced, carries you beyond every model to the place of seeing with no seer, knowing with no knower, where there is nothing left to describe, only absolute freedom. On the surface, quantum mechanics and Buddhist wisdom share striking intersections. Both dismantle fixed views of reality. Both highlight the pivotal role of the observer. Both show that nothing stands apart, everything changes and co-arises in mutual dependence. But when we probe the essence, a wide gap appears. This gap is why the Dharma goes farther than quantum theory, not only in scope, but in its capacity to lead beings to liberation. First, the scope of Buddhist investigation spans mind, matter, and karma. Quantum mechanics examines only the material world at the microscopic level: particles, energy, quantum fields, and physical phenomena. Even when it speaks of an observer, the term is understood physically or mathematically as an element of a measurement setup, not as the psychological or spiritual essence of the observer. The Dharma is different. The Buddha's field of observation embraces not only matter rupa, but also mind chitta, mental factors, cetasika, and the entire causal law of karmic results operating among them. This is a comprehensive picture quantum theory cannot reach, because karma and mind cannot be measured by physical devices. Second, the Dharma penetrates the deep causes of suffering. Quantum theory may shake the illusion of a solid world, but it does not make people suffer less. A quantum physicist may master uncertainty, entanglement, and the quantum vacuum, yet still flare with anger, anxiety, envy, or depression. Scientific knowledge does not automatically transform the heart. The Buddha did not stop at describing impermanence and non-self. He identified craving, aversion, and ignorance as the causes of suffering, pointed to the Noble Eightfold Path as its cessation, and taught that ignorance is ended through training in virtue, concentration, and wisdom. This is a task science has not taken up and is unlikely to. Third, the Dharma offers a method of personal verification. To test a quantum theory, you need billion-dollar laboratories, teams of scientists, and sophisticated instruments. In the Dharma, the laboratory is your own body and mind. The instruments are mindfulness and the power of concentration, and you can begin right now anywhere. No machines, no complex formulas, only a correct method and persistence. The result, seeing non-self and impermanence, depends on no one else. It is your own realization. Fourth, the Dharma transcends the limits of models and hypotheses. Every scientific theory, including quantum mechanics, rests on models, indirect descriptions that can be replaced when new evidence appears. The Buddha's seeing does not rest on hypothesis and needs no external experimental verification. It is the immediate recognition of the nature of phenomena. Once seen directly, nothing remains to debate or to replace, like the drinker who knows at once whether the water is hot or cold without anyone's explanation. Fifth, the Dharma leads beyond the round of birth and death. Quantum mechanics helps us understand the universe, but it remains within samsara. It explains how conditioned phenomena operate, but does not offer a way out of them. The Buddha points to a path that goes beyond the conditioned to nirvana, the unborn unceasing beyond time and space. No physical theory can describe this, for it lies outside measurement and calculation. Sixth, the Dharma allows the observer to be changed. In quantum theory, the observer is just a parameter in an equation. In the Dharma, the observer is the very stream of mind moments, and that stream can be transformed. When mind is trained through virtue, concentration, and wisdom, the observer becomes clear, no longer governed by greed, hatred, and delusion. Then the reality you experience transforms not merely conceptually, but as liberation. Seventh, the Dharma releases even the concept of an ultimate reality. Many quantum physicists, after discovering microscopic principles, believe they are approaching a theory of everything, an ultimate description of the universe. The Buddha teaches that any notion of ultimate is itself conditioned a construct of discriminative mind. When emptiness is realized, all concepts of foundational substance or ultimate ground are let go. Ultimate truth cannot be caged within any model or concept. This difference can be pictured with a metaphor. Quantum mechanics is like a state-of-the-art submarine that can dive to the deepest layers of the material ocean. Buddha's wisdom is the capacity not only to dive beneath the waves, but to step completely out of that ocean. Science explores and describes currents, creatures, and pressures within the ocean. The Dharma shows how not to be swept along by any current at all. So when we say the Dharma goes farther than quantum mechanics, it isn't to deny science's value, but to put it in its proper place, a marvelous tool for understanding the material world that is nevertheless insufficient to understand and liberate the mind. The Buddha did not need an electron microscope, yet he saw each momentary arising and passing of mind and phenomena. He did not need a nuclear laboratory, yet he deciphered the karmic law of cause and effect operating over countless eons. In short, quantum mechanics and the Dharma can shake hands in dismantling old illusions about reality. From there, however, the two paths diverge. Science goes deep into description. The Dharma goes deep into liberation. One side explains how things operate. The other shows how not to be bound by any operation. It is precisely here that the Dharma goes further, not by a few steps, but by an entirely different dimension, the dimension of absolute freedom. When the Dharma and quantum mechanics are set side by side, many people feel excited to discover surprising parallels. Yet that very excitement can lead to serious misunderstandings if we fail to distinguish the boundaries between the two fields. The Dharma is a path of practice leading to the end of suffering, while quantum mechanics is an experimental science devoted to the microscopic material world. If we confuse their roles, aims, or methods, we fall into errors that are dangerous both intellectually and practically. Misunderstanding 1. Equating the Dharma with quantum science. Some hear that non-self resembles the uncertainty principle, dependent origination resembles entanglement, and emptiness resembles the quantum vacuum, and then conclude that the Dharma is an ancient quantum theory. This is a fundamental mistake. The Dharma is not a physical model and does not aim to explain how electrons behave. The Buddha did not speak of quarks, photons, or quantum fields. He spoke of the nature of suffering, its causes, and the path to its end. The parallels are at the level of abstract principles, not identical in subject matter or purpose. Misunderstanding 2. Using the Dharma to prove quantum mechanics, or vice versa. Some try to use scriptures to predict quantum phenomena or quantum theory to prove the Buddha's words. The problem is that the two fields have different languages, concepts, and methods. Forcing them together invites distortion on both sides. This misrepresents the Dharma and undermines scientific seriousness. Misunderstanding 3. Interpreting Buddhist concepts through a physics lens. For example, hearing emptiness and thinking it means background energy or the quantum vacuum. This reduces emptiness to a physical phenomenon, whereas emptiness means the lack of inherent nature in all phenomena beyond existence, and non-existence beyond time and space. Similarly, hearing non-self and equating it with quantum indeterminacy. But non-self in the Dharma includes mind, feelings, and ideas, domains, physics does not touch. Misunderstanding 4. Assuming that understanding quantum theory equals understanding the Dharma. A quantum physicist may master Schrödinger's equations and compute intricate probabilities, but that does not mean they understand impermanence and non-self in the practical sense. The Dharma is not mere knowledge, it is wisdom born of direct experience. Conversely, an awakened practitioner may see dependent origination and emptiness clearly, without knowing anything about quarks or Planck's constant. Misunderstanding 5. Using quantum theory as proof to shore up blind faith. Someone who believes in the Dharma on a devotional basis may read a few comparisons and say, "Science has proven the Buddha right," but in fact, science does not prove nirvana, karma, or awakening. This attitude can foster a dangerous dependency. If future science says something different, that faith wavers. The Buddha does not need scientific proof, because his path rests on personal realization, not external authority. Misunderstanding 6. Abandoning practice for comparison. Some people get swept up in reading, speaking, and debating the similarities between the Dharma and quantum mechanics, but spend no time meditating, observing the mind, or keeping precepts. They turn the Dharma into an academic topic or an intellectual pastime instead of a way of life and transformation. This is the opposite of the Buddha's purpose in teaching. To avoid these misunderstandings, remember, comparison is a means, not the end. When using quantum theory to illustrate the Dharma, treat it as an example that helps modern people visualize, not as the foundation of the Buddha's truth. And when you notice parallels, stay clear about the fundamental differences. Do not lump the two into one. Also bear in mind that comparison is truly useful only if it stirs the urge to practice. If hearing about the uncertainty principle moves you to contemplate non-self, or hearing about entanglement moves you to explore dependent origination, the comparison has value. If it only satisfies curiosity without changing how you live, it remains theoretical. In other words, setting the Dharma alongside quantum mechanics is a double-edged sword. It can build a bridge that helps modern people approach the Buddha's wisdom. It can also quantumize the Dharma into something shallow, stripped of liberative depth. Therefore, whenever we compare, keep the mind like someone holding a lamp to light the way. Shine just enough to see the path, then set the lamp down and walk. Don't cling to the lamp and forget the way home. Noticing the intersection between the Dharma and quantum mechanics remains an intellectual amusement unless we turn it into action and lived experience. Both fields, though from different foundations, offer a shared message: reality is not fixed. Everything changes, and the observer plays a decisive role in how the world is experienced. The question is what we will do with this understanding to live more peacefully, more freely, and with less suffering. First, apply the observer principle to daily life. In quantum mechanics, a particle's state depends on how we observe it. In the Dharma, the state of mind and the way we see the world depend on our own mind. This means that by changing our view, we change our experience. When something unpleasant happens, instead of reacting on autopilot, pause like a mindful observer. Recognize the emotion and watch it without identifying with it. Just as changing the measurement angle in a quantum experiment changes, the outcome changing your observing attitude shifts the psychological result and your behavior. But the Buddha's wisdom is the capacity not only to dive beneath the waves, but to step completely out of that ocean. Science discovers and describes currents, creatures, and pressures within the sea. The Dharma shows how not to be carried along by any current at all. Thus, to say the Dharma goes farther than quantum mechanics is not to deny the value of science, but to put it in its proper place, a marvelous tool for understanding the material world that is nevertheless insufficient to understand. Liberate the mind. The Buddha did not need an electron microscope, yet he saw each momentary arising and passing of mind and phenomena. He did not need a nuclear laboratory, yet he deciphered the karmic law of cause and effect operating over countless aeons. In short, quantum mechanics and the Dharma can shake hands in dismantling old illusions about reality. From there, the paths diverge. Science goes deep into description. The Dharma goes deep into liberation. One side explains how things operate. The other shows how not to be bound by any operation whatsoever. And precisely here, the Dharma goes farther, not by a few steps, but by an entirely different dimension, the dimension of absolute freedom. When placing the Dharma and quantum mechanics side by side, many people feel a thrill at the unexpected parallels. Yet that excitement easily gives rise to serious misunderstandings if we do not keep their boundaries clear. The Dharma is a path of practice leading to the end of suffering. Quantum mechanics is an experimental science that studies the microscopic material world. If we confuse their roles, aims, or methods, we fall into errors that are dangerous both intellectually and practically. Second, understand impermanence and release attachment. The uncertainty principle shows that nothing is fixed. Non-self shows there is no independent entity to cling to. Applied to life, this helps us be lighter in the face of loss and change. When a relationship shifts, a job ends, or a possession disappears, rather than resisting and suffering, we can remember that all phenomena are dependently arisen. When conditions converge, they arrive. When conditions disperse, they depart. This is not passivity, but wise, letting go like a scientist who does not get angry when results change, but watches with curiosity to learn more. Third, practice mindfulness as a precise measuring device. Mindfulness is the instrument that lets the mind observe itself and the world clearly without distortion. Just as a good detector yields accurate data in quantum experiments, a mindful mind gives us a true view of reality, rather than one warped by greed, aversion, and delusion. Whenever we eat, drink, walk, stand, work, or speak, if we are fully present, we will clearly perceive the data of experience, sensations, sounds, thoughts, feelings, and thus we are no longer dragged around by them. Fourth, see dependent origination and live responsibly for every action. Entanglement shows that particles which have interacted remain instantly correlated. Dependent origination shows that all phenomena are interrelated and mutually influential. With this awareness, we become more careful with every word, deed, and even thought. A kind word can ripple outward and change someone's life. A harsh word can trigger unforeseeable consequences. To apply the wisdom of dependent origination is to live as though every vibration we make is spreading across the web of life, because it truly island. Fifth, transform karma through practice and change the probabilities of the future. Understand karma as you understand quantum probabilities. The future is not fixed. It depends on present conditions. This grants both power and responsibility. Each present moment is a chance to plant wholesome causes and diminish unwholesome ones. Instead of surrendering to fate, we can actively program the future by cultivating compassion, keeping precepts, and developing wisdom. Small changes in today's habits can pivot the course of an entire life tomorrow. Sixth, release rigid concepts of self and world. Emptiness in the Dharma and the quantum vacuum both dismantle the notion of a solid ground to grasp. Applied, we see that I is not an immutable entity, and the world is a stream of ever-changing phenomena. Letting go of rigid concepts makes us more flexible, more open-hearted, and less conflicted. We no longer need to prove the self right. We focus instead on understanding and learning. Seventh, use meditation as a living laboratory. No million-dollar apparatus is required. Anyone can test the Buddha's wisdom by sitting still and observing body feelings, mind, and phenomena. As the mind grows quiet, we see more clearly impermanence and non-self and dependent origination operating right within our own body-mind. This is not a matter of belief, but of direct experimental result, repeatable anytime, anywhere if we practice. Eighth, live timelessly in the present. Both Kshana in the Dharma and quantum time indicate that the present is not an extended span, but a series of arising and passing moments. Seeing this, we can live fully in each moment without obsession over past or future. Whenever the mind wanders, we remember that only this moment truly exists, and even this moment is already passing, so let us live awake. All these applications converge on a common point: transform the way we observe, in order to transform the reality we experience. Here is where quantum mechanics and the Dharma meet. But the Dharma goes farther by giving us the method to train the observer ourselves into a mind that is clear, free, and wise. Understood deeply and applied correctly, this wisdom not only helps us comprehend the universe, it helps us live in peace within it. Lived this way, every moment of our life becomes a vivid experiment in which we continuously test and refresh our seeing, not to satisfy curiosity, but to move step by step toward absolute freedom. Having walked the whole arc of comparison between Buddhist wisdom and quantum science, we see two things clearly. First, there are intersections so striking as to be astonishing. Second, there remains a gap that no equation or experiment can bridge. The intersections help contemporary people approach the Dharma with greater ease. The gap is precisely the space in which the Dharma displays its depth beyond every scientific model. Both quantum mechanics and the Dharma dismantle deep-seated human illusions. The uncertainty principle shakes our faith in absolute determinism. Non-self shatters faith in a permanent self. Entanglement reveals that objects which have interacted remain instantly linked. Dependent origination reveals that the whole universe is a net of mutual dependence. The quantum vacuum affirms that empty space is brimming with energy. Emptiness teaches that all phenomena lack inherent nature, and precisely because of that, limitless phenomena can arise. Both emphasize the role of the observer in shaping experienced reality. These shared notes make the comparison compelling. They open a new language for teaching the Dharma to modern minds accustomed to science and experiment. Hearing that dependent origination is like entanglement may stir curiosity. Learning that a mind moment resembles quantum time may help one imagine the mind's subtle arising and ceasing. Such comparisons are a bridge carrying ancient teachings across millennia into the minds of people today. Yet precisely at these points of contact, we can forget that the aims of the two paths are entirely different. Quantum mechanics seeks to understand how the material world functions using mathematical models and experimental data. The Dharma seeks to understand how mind and phenomena function through direct experience and inner transformation. Quantum theory can help us build technology, but it cannot teach us to relinquish greed, hatred, and delusion. The Dharma can lead us to absolute freedom, but it does not aim to build machines or predict electron trajectories. The gap also lies in method. Science observes indirectly through instruments. The Dharma observes directly with concentrated mind and insight. Science is always bounded by hypotheses and models. The Dharma stands beyond all concepts. Science measures physical phenomena. the Dharma realizes ultimate reality beyond the conditioned. That gap is absolute. One remains within, arising and ceasing. The other points the way out of it. Without vigilance, comparison easily becomes conflation, turning the Dharma into an ancient quantum theory, or turning quantum theory into proof of the Dharma. The danger is that we impoverish. Both science loses objectivity. The Dharma loses its liberative thrust. If we keep the right attitude, treating comparison as means not end, then we gain a great opportunity to see that the Dharma is anything but foreign to modern people, and indeed anticipated and encompasses many of science's discoveries. What takes the Dharma beyond quantum mechanics is not that it got it right 2500 years ago, but that the Buddha laid out a practical path for realizing the truth. He not only described that all phenomena are non-self, he showed how to see non-self within everyday experience. He not only affirmed that everything is dependently arisen, he taught how to perceive this interconnection and live in harmony with it. He not only said that time is a concept, he pointed to nirvana, a state beyond time. These are domains that no science, including quantum mechanics, can replace. Quantum science and the Dharma, though different in method and aim, both lead to a major shift in understanding, letting go of the notion of a fixed reality and opening to a more flexible, expansive view. For science, this is a cognitive advance. For the Dharma, it is the doorway to liberating wisdom. If we can combine both understanding science to broaden our perspective and practicing the Dharma to transform the heart, modern people can live in a technologically advanced world while maintaining a peaceful, lucid mind. The meeting of Buddhist wisdom and quantum mechanics is a beautiful phenomenon of our age. It shows that awakened wisdom is not bound by time, and that science, though traveling a different road, is gradually touching principles the Buddha already saw. But the remaining gap reminds us that intellectual understanding is not enough. We must step onto the path of practice. Only by observing for ourselves, experiencing and living by that wisdom, do we truly measure ultimate reality, a measurement that uses no instruments, yields no numbers, and yet yields absolute freedom. Then each life becomes a living testament to this truth. However fast the outer world may change, an awakened mind remains steady, lucid, and peaceful beyond the limits of quantum theory and every other doctrine humanity has known.